The rhythmic beep of the cardiac monitor was the only sound keeping me grounded while my 5-year-old daughter, Lily, fought for her life in the pediatric ICU. Her tiny hand burned with fever as severe pneumonia collapsed her lungs. Terrified, I posted a quiet photo holding her hand on our private family group chat, simply begging for prayers. Less than 90 seconds later, my wealthy, image-obsessed mother, Eleanor, replied with pure venom, "Delete this immediately. It looks pathetic, and she is your burden, not mine. Don't embarrass our family name." In that sterile room, 27 years of obedience shattered. While Eleanor worried about country club gossip, I uncovered the forged medical trust she stole from my daughter to fund my brother's luxury penthouse. She thought she could discard my child to protect her pride, so I walked straight into her elite charity gala with the receipts that destroyed her empire forever. My name is Emma. I'm 27 years old, working long hours as a veterinary technician just to keep a modest 2-bedroom apartment over our heads. For as long as I can remember, my entire life had been defined by walking on eggshells around my mother, Eleanor. Eleanor was a woman who treated public perception like sacred scripture. In her world of country club brunches, antique auctions, and high society galas, people weren't family members. They were accessories designed to reflect her immaculate taste and unblemished status. And in her eyes, I had always been the single blemish on her polished record. That bitter reality collided head-on with the worst night of my entire existence. At 2 a.m., my 5-year-old daughter, Lily, woke up struggling for air, her lips turning pale and her small chest heaving against a terrifying fever. By 4 a.m., she was admitted to the pediatric intensive care unit with acute bilateral pneumonia and respiratory collapse. The room was freezing, filled with the sterile hum of an oxygen machine and the relentless, rhythmic beep of a cardiac monitor. I sat by her bedside in a hard plastic chair, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I held her limp, feverish little fingers. For 6 agonizing hours, the medical team worked tirelessly around her bed, unable to guarantee if she would stabilize. Exhausted, terrified, and desperate for any shred of strength, I took a quiet, close-up photo of our intertwined hands resting against the hospital sheets. I posted it to our private family group chat with a simple, trembling plea: "Please pray for Lily tonight. She's fighting so hard in the ICU." I wasn't asking for money. I wasn't asking for a visit. I just needed my family to care. Less than 90 seconds later, my phone vibrated against the bedside table. My chest seized, half expecting a rare word of maternal comfort. Instead, the screen lit up with Eleanor's direct message: "Delete this immediately. It looks pathetic, and she is your burden, not mine. Don't embarrass our family name." I stared at the cold, glowing pixels while the heart monitor beeped beside me. In that sterile room, the 30 years of invisible chains my mother held around my throat finally shattered into pieces. I looked at the glowing screen, the harshness of those words burning into my mind, but deep down, I wasn't even surprised. This was Eleanor's currency: conditional affection, measured strictly by how useful you were to her social standing. Growing up in her cavernous, perfectly manicured estate had felt less like a childhood and more like an audition for a role I was never good enough to play. My older brother, Julian, was the golden child. He looked the part, spoke the part, and followed Eleanor's script without question. If Julian broke a crystal vase, it was an artistic mishap. If I brought home an A- instead of an A, I was subjected to 3 days of chilling, silent disgust. Eleanor treated human connection like an investment portfolio, and I had always yielded too low a return. The final fracture had happened 6 years ago when I became pregnant with Lily. Eleanor had already arranged a roadmap for my life, a strategic marriage to the son of a prominent city developer to merge social circles. When I refused to play along with her arranged transaction and chose to keep my child and raise her independently, Eleanor's response was cold, swift, and absolute. She cut me off financially overnight, telling our extended family that I was wayward and unstable, all while ensuring I still appeared in the annual holiday family portrait to maintain the illusion of unity. While Julian was gifted a luxury penthouse and a seat on several charitable foundations, I worked double shifts at the animal hospital, scrubbing surgical tools, eating microwave noodles, and budgeting every single dollar to ensure Lily had warm clothes, healthy food, and a loving home. I never asked Eleanor for a single dime. I took pride in building an honest life far away from her toxic dinner parties, where wealthy acquaintances sipped champagne and traded cruel gossip like currency. Looking down at Lily's small, pale face in the ICU bed, the contrast was sickening. My entire world was tied to this brave little girl fighting for every breath, while the woman who gave birth to me could only calculate the embarrassment of a hospital photo. Eleanor thought family meant control, leverage, and appearances. But as I leaned down and kissed Lily's burning forehead, I realized what true family was, and that I would burn down every bridge to my mother's world to protect my daughter. By the following afternoon, Lily had finally stabilized, the heavy rasps in her chest softening into shallow, steady breaths. I hadn't slept in over 36 hours. My hair was tied up in a messy knot, and my clothes were wrinkled, but the relief washing over me felt almost sacred. Then, the heavy double doors of the pediatric wing clicked open. The unmistakable click of designer heels echoed sharply against the linoleum flooring. I turned around, and my heart instantly turned to lead. Eleanor was gliding down the hallway in an immaculate cream-colored trench coat, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors and carrying a leather handbag that cost more than my entire year of rent. She didn't look like a grandmother visiting a critically ill child. She looked like a CEO inspecting an inconvenient liability. She didn't step inside Lily's room. Instead, she tapped lightly on the glass window, motioning with two manicured fingers for me to step outside. I quietly closed Lily's door behind me, slipping into the quiet alcove near the empty nurse's station. Before walking out, my fingers instinctively slid into my cardigan pocket, quietly pressing the record button on my phone's voice memo app. "What are you doing here, Mother?" I asked, my voice flat and completely devoid of warmth. Eleanor didn't bother asking how Lily was doing. She didn't even look through the window at her granddaughter. Instead, she lowered her sunglasses, her sharp blue eyes narrowing with cold annoyance. "Margaret Vance called me this morning from the country club," Eleanor hissed under her breath, her voice razor-sharp. "She saw your melodramatic post before you took it down. She asked if our family needed financial assistance for medical bills. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for me? My daughter almost died last night," I whispered, the absurdity of her priorities hitting me like a physical blow. "And she is still breathing, isn't she?" Eleanor snapped back without missing a beat. "You brought this entirely on yourself by choosing this destitute lifestyle. But what you will not do is sabotage your brother. Julian's engagement party to the senator's daughter is in 3 weeks. The last thing this family needs is whispers about a sickly, illegitimate child dragging our name through the dirt. Keep your mess to yourself, Emma. Keep her out of sight." In that corridor, watching her sneer at the thought of her own flesh and blood, something inside me went cold and still. The terrified little girl who had spent decades begging for this woman's approval simply ceased to exist. I looked her dead in the eye, feeling the phone recording silently in my pocket. "Is that all?" Eleanor adjusted her sunglasses, disgusted by my lack of submission. "Consider this your only warning," she said, turning on her heel and strutting back toward the elevators without glancing back once. I stood in the silence of the corridor, pulled out my phone, and saved the audio file. For the first time in 27 years, I wasn't afraid of Eleanor. I was ready for her. 3 days later, Lily was finally moved out of intensive care and into a regular pediatric recovery room. While she was taking a quiet afternoon nap, the hospital's patient financial coordinator stopped by to hand me the preliminary billing packet. The total was staggering, over $40,000 in specialized critical care and life support therapies. As I sat by the window sifting through the breakdown, I opened the small stack of mail my neighbor had collected from my apartment. Right in the middle was a thick, certified legal notice from a private estate management firm in the city. I tore the envelope open. My breath caught in my throat. The letter was a formal notification that an established medical and educational trust fund had been entirely depleted and liquidated 12 months prior. I knew about this fund. Before my father passed away 7 years ago, he had quietly set aside a $250,000 protected trust specifically for his future grandchildren's healthcare and higher education. He knew Eleanor's manipulative nature and wanted to make sure any child of mine would always have an emergency safety net that Eleanor couldn't touch. Or so he had thought. According to the legal summary, the trust had been closed and the entire balance transferred into a private commercial account under the authority of the executor, my mother. Attached to the closure notice was a signed affidavit bearing what purported to be my signature, declaring that the beneficiary had waived all rights to the funds due to sufficient independent financial stability. I stared at the black ink on the signature line. It wasn't my handwriting. The slant was entirely wrong, mimicking my name with the sharp, deliberate flourishes I had seen Eleanor use on holiday cards my whole life. Within an hour, I was on a secure video consultation with Marcus Hayes, a senior probate and trust attorney who had been a close colleague of my father. I sent him high-resolution scans of the documents along with my actual legal signature for my government ID. Marcus reviewed the files on his screen, his expression turning grave. "Emma, this isn't just a contractual dispute," he said, adjusting his glasses. "The disbursement dates coincide directly with the down payment on your brother Julian's luxury penthouse in the financial district. If this signature is forged, your mother executed an illegal misappropriation of dedicated trust assets." "Can we prove it?" I asked, my voice steady. "Without question," Marcus replied. "A basic forensic handwriting analysis will tear this document apart in minutes. We can file an emergency injunction and freeze every account tied to the transfer." For years, I had quietly absorbed Eleanor's insults, walked away from her passive-aggressive cruelty, and let her believe she had total control just to keep the peace. But taking the money my father had left behind to protect his granddaughter's life and funneling it into a golden lifestyle for Julian while Lily lay in an ICU bed, that was a line she could never uncross. I closed the laptop, looked at Lily sleeping peacefully under the hospital blanket, and made my decision. I wasn't going to hide in the shadows anymore. I was going to take back everything that belonged to my daughter. By Friday evening, Lily was discharged into the caring hands of my trusted Aunt Clara, resting comfortably at home with a stack of coloring books and a bowl of chicken soup. With my daughter safe, I pulled on the only tailored black dress I owned, swept my hair back, and headed downtown to the Grand Sovereign Hotel. Tonight was the annual Heritage Charity Gala, the crown jewel of Eleanor's social calendar, where she reigned as the chairwoman of the board. The grand ballroom was awash in crystal chandeliers, live string quartets, and high society patrons sipping champagne. As I stepped through the ornate arched entryway, Eleanor spotted me from across the room. Her eyes widened in brief alarm before shifting into a calculated, performative smile. She saw an opportunity. Gliding over in a sweeping emerald silk gown, she grabbed my arm with an iron grip, steering me directly toward a circle of prominent donors and board directors. "Everyone, look who made a surprise appearance," Eleanor announced smoothly, her voice dripping with sweet, theatrical condescension. "My darling daughter, Emma. As many of you know, she chose to live a very humble, independent path as a single mother. Despite her struggles, our family always ensures she has our full moral support. It's so vital to give back to the less fortunate, isn't it?" Polite nods and murmurs of patronizing sympathy rippled through the circle. Julian stood nearby, smugly swirling a glass of scotch, completely unbothered. I looked directly at the lead board trustee, Mr. Sterling, and smiled. "Actually, speaking of giving back, Mother," I said clearly, my voice projecting across the immediate tables as the surrounding conversation began to quiet down. "I brought something regarding the charitable disbursements from my late father's estate." Eleanor's smile tightened into a rigid grimace. "Emma, darling, this is hardly the time." "I think it's the exact time," I interrupted calmly, pulling a slim leather folder from my bag. Without breaking eye contact, I handed the packet directly to Mr. Sterling. Inside, You'll find the forensic document report showing that the $250,000 medical trust my father established for his granddaughter was liquidated using a forged signature and transferred directly to fund Julian's private penthouse. A collective, stunned silence fell over the circle. Eleanor's face drained of every ounce of color. And just so there's complete transparency, I added, holding up my phone and pressing play on the saved audio file. This is Eleanor's official response while Lily was fighting for her life in the pediatric ICU 3 nights ago. Eleanor's cold, recorded voice rang out crystal clear across the ballroom. Julian's engagement party is in 3 weeks. The last thing this family needs is whispers about a sickly child dragging our name through the dirt. Keep her out of sight. The ballroom was dead silent. Julian froze, his drink suspended midair. Eleanor stood paralyzed under the glaring crystal lights, her immaculate mask completely shattered in front of the only audience she had ever cared about. The silence in the grand ballroom was deafening. For 10 agonizing seconds, no one moved. Mr. Sterling looked down at the forensic audit in his hands, his expression shifting from shock to absolute disgust, before handing the documents to the other board members. The whispering started like a low hum, spreading from table to table as the city's elite realized what they had just witnessed. Eleanor tried to regain her composure, raising her hands with a desperate, trembling laugh. This is absurd. A slanderous fabrication by an ungrateful daughter. Save it, Eleanor. Mr. Sterling cut in, his voice cutting through the hall with quiet authority. We will be reviewing these documents with legal counsel immediately. You are stepping down as chairwoman effective tonight. Leave the venue. Julian, realizing his own lavish lifestyle was crumbling before his eyes, tried to back away, whispering furiously at Eleanor for dragging his name into the mess. The very son she had sacrificed everything to protect turned his back on her the second the consequences arrived. I didn't stay to watch the rest of the collapse. I turned around and walked out of the ballroom into the cool night air, leaving my mother standing completely isolated beneath the glittering chandeliers. The legal hammer fell swift and merciless over the following weeks. Faced with irrefutable evidence of forged signatures, fraud, and embezzlement of estate funds, Eleanor's high-priced lawyers advised her not to let the matter reach open court. Marcus executed an aggressive settlement agreement. Every single dollar of the $250,000 medical trust, plus full compound interest and legal fees, was reclaimed and locked into a court-ordered, independent trust fund exclusively managed for Lily's care and education. To cover the repayment, Julian was forced to list his luxury penthouse on the market, while Eleanor's name was quietly scrubbed from every charitable foundation and social board in the city. My phone rang constantly, with frantic voicemails from Eleanor. Her voice swung wildly between tearful pleas about family unity and venomous accusations of betrayal. I didn't listen to more than 5 seconds of them. Sitting at my kitchen table with the final settlement paperwork signed and sealed, I selected Eleanor's contact card. With a steady hand and a calm heart, I pressed block, permanently severing the final thread of toxicity from my life. 2 months after the gala, the final hospital clearance came through. Lily was completely recovered, her lungs clear and her laughter filling every corner of our sunny apartment once again. Watching her chase bubbles across the living room rug, vibrant and healthy, made every ounce of pain and struggle over the past years fade into distant memory. All of her medical debts had been paid in full directly from the recovered estate, and the remainder of my father's trust sat safely locked away in a high-yield account, guaranteeing her college education and a secure future without any toxic strings attached. For the first time in 27 years, my life was entirely my own. I learned that true family isn't defined by a shared surname, an expensive address, or a curated social media profile. It isn't about maintaining an immaculate public image while harboring cruelty behind closed doors. Family is the person who holds your hand in the cold silence of an intensive care unit. It's the unconditional promise to protect, nurture, and stand up for those who cannot fight for themselves, no matter what it costs. Cutting ties with Eleanor wasn't an act of revenge, it was an act of survival. I spent decades trying to earn the love of a woman who was incapable of giving it, believing that enduring her cruelty was the price of being a good daughter. But the moment she targeted my child, the illusion shattered. You don't owe loyalty to people who demand your silence to protect their pride. As the afternoon sun streamed through our kitchen window, Lily ran up to me with a freshly drawn picture of the two of us standing under a bright yellow sun, holding hands. She pressed it against my leg, smiling up at me with absolute, untainted trust. I picked her up, holding her close to my chest, listening to the steady, strong rhythm of her breathing. The cycle of emotional manipulation, shame, and conditional affection had ruled my family for generations. But as I kissed my daughter's cheek, I knew with absolute certainty it ended with me.